You're listening to a podcast from 702.
702.
Travel. It is time for us to travel, and this time we are traveling to interesting history and heritage sites that you can visit while you're on vacation. We're joined by Carla Lewis, lifestyle and travel editor of the Beeld Newspaper. Carla, welcome to 702 Afternoons. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be chatting about heritage sites.
So before we even get into the meat of where one should be going, why is it so important for us as South Africans to be going to explore heritage sites and discovering our history? Because in some ways, I feel like those that had more of a privileged upbringing were naturally just exposed to these places through school trips or family holidays. And then as one gets older, they aren't necessarily taking the time to truly explore their own country because you feel like, I know this place. And then you would rather go, to the Vatican City and be exploring that.
It is so important for us to be exploring our own backyards. I mean, travel makes sense of society, whether it's the present society, whether it's the previous societies, and it tells us who we are. It tells us who we were. It doesn't necessarily show very flattering of us, as you would see of some of the places I would be discussing, but we need to see the good and the bad, and we need to make sense of it all.
Okay, so let's jump straight into our very first spot, Kruger Station, Limpopo, at Kukuza Rest Camp.
So this is for the people that's visiting the Kruger over the Easter weekend. And when you first go into the Kruger Station, it's a lovely lifestyle precinct. You can have a gin and tonic. You can shop for some really nice souvenirs. You can have amazing lunch there. But this Kruger Station is positioned on what was the Kruger Salati line. Now, everybody thinks corruption is just a present problem, but this one goes back all the way to the 1800s, and it has the honor of being one of the most expensive railways ever built. So the South African Republic granted the concession to two French entrepreneurs called Baron Eugene Oppenheim and his brother Baron Robert Oppenheim, and they proceeded to register the Salati Railway Company in 1892 in Belgium. So as these things go, is they subcontracted it to a British company. And a few years later, when people started going through the books, they realized that things are looking a bit dodgy here. And there were major expenses that weren't budgeted for. And then they realized, well, there was a whole bunch of politicians from the Volksraad that were riding on the gravy train, and they were getting kickbacks for giving this concession to the Oppenheim brothers. So in the end, it doesn't only happen today. This is a dream for an investigative journalist, I think.
And that's why I think that people mustn't think corruption and dodgy deals and scandals were only happening recently. They've been.
Oh no, if you saw what went on in the heydays, there was some horrible skullduggery going on, but the Oppenheim brothers, they were hauled through in front of the Belgian court, and there were all sorts of juicy things coming out, similar to our Zondo Commission. They paid over £30,000 for travel expenses to politicians on the Volksraad. They were greasing their hands with cash. They were greasing their hands with gold watches. They were giving them gold buggies, which was probably the version those days of a BMW. And even President Paul Kruger was hailed in front of the court, and he apparently said he's seeing no harm in everybody receiving payment as long as as long as it does not amount to bribery, which I don't know what this is, if it wasn't bribery.
Yes.
But
bribery is when you say, can I pay? It's like more direct, but what they were doing was not bribery.
No, that's that's bribery and kickbacks. So the French-Belgian brothers, they went to prison for 3 years, but nobody of the Volksraad were ever held accountable.
Yes.
And they sat with 120 kilometers of useless railway line up there in the Bundus, and it cost them, even then, millions of pounds.
Yes.
So it is a sad story, but I also think it is a story that but it demonstrates the zeitgeist of South Africa now and then, and just the way that the politicians always functioned.
Listen, this is very fascinating. And I think what's so wonderful, just to go back to the reasons, is that there are all these hidden stories that we aren't necessarily going to learn in school. So I find, what you're sharing so fascinating. And I think that is a good enough reason for individuals to be interested in going to explore. Let's move on to Thulamela ruins in the northern part of the Kruger, that's near the Punda Maria Gate.
Thulamela ruins, I've only seen it from far, but it is one of my bucket list destinations that I really want to visit. So you were talking about in the past that people maybe suppress things in our own curriculum. I know when I went to school, the Paul Kruger and the Zuid-Afrikaanse Republiek, they were held forth as these heroes, and it wasn't always like that. And in similar ways, very sophisticated African kingdoms like Thulamela and Mapungubwe, they were sort of like suppressed, or the information around that was suppressed. And if there were any excavations going on, it didn't always make it into the general public's knowledge. But Thulamela is one of the most impressive archaeological digs.
I also can't say that word. Archaeological. There we go.
Yeah, that is a tongue twister. And it was a very sophisticated civilization. They traded with Arab, Portuguese, and West African merchants. There were digs. They discovered Chinese porcelain, imported textiles, ivory bracelets. And here you have this amazing sophisticated culture and these amazing ruins that, it doesn't rival those of Great Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe. But it's such a rich culture, especially for people that's from the Venda descendants, because it was a pre-Venda civilization that were living there. But we don't know about this. We go to the Kruger and we want to go and see the Big Five and, do a braaivleis. And this, the heritage is sitting there right on our doorstep, and we don't know about it.
And there's so many other places that can be explored. The kingdom of Mapungubwe in Limpopo near Musina. There you can visit the museum. There's a heritage tour you can take there. There's a Mapungubwe collection, the Battle of Isandlwana in KZN, and we've had a whole masterclass on that. But thank you so much, Carla, for chatting to us about the interesting history and heritage sites one can visit while on vacation, especially with Easter coming up. Do make a turn at those places. Do go and get yourself knowledgeable and get to find out a little bit more about your country. Carla Lewis, lifestyle and travel editor of Beeld Newspaper.